Hello, this video segment is designed to help you understand the template. I'm asking you to use the template for all three speeches this semester, for the Who Am I Really presentation, for the informative speech, and the persuasive speech. You will find that my rubric, which I will use to grade your presentations, is linked to the template. So using the template will help you make sure that you incorporate all the elements that I'm looking for when I grade your Who Am I Really, your informative, and your persuasive speech. Let me share my screen with you, and you can see what I mean by it. All right. The title is self-explanatory. The general aim here, this is whether you are planning to inform, persuade, demonstrate, or commemorate. So your aim might be to inform my class about my background, the experiences that I've had, to inform a community about services that are available to those who are immigrants. It could be to demonstrate how to rebuild a computer. The specific purpose, on the other hand, is where you specify how you want your audience to respond as a result of your presentation. It's always best to begin with the following phrase: the audience will. What do you want the audience to do? The audience will call their local representative and urge them to pass a resolution legalizing all drugs, for example. You need to know exactly what you want your audience to do. In the conclusion of your speech, there's a section that's entitled Audience Response. So your specific purpose ties in to your audience response. The thesis statement is your speech in a sentence. It's a summary of your speech. It needs to be precise, just one sentence long. It needs to be provocative, and it needs to capture what your presentation is about. Then the organizational pattern. How do you plan to unpack your presentation? Will you use a metaphor? And I'm asking you to use a metaphor for the Who Am I Really? So if you're comparing, so it'd be a metaphorical pattern or an analogy, a comparison. Very often, organizational patterns are used that are more chronological in nature, especially if you're talking about a historical time period. If you're trying to explain how things are related to each other spatially, you'd use a spatial pattern. And we'll get to some of the other patterns later on. So for now, think of a metaphor that you want to use, and that you'll use that to organize your main points. The introduction has 5 functions. First is the attention getter. Second is the reason to listen. Third is the thesis statement. Let me fix that. Then fourth is speaker credibility, and then the fifth is the preview of the main points. Starting off with the attention getter. This needs to be powerful. This is where you draw the audience in by inviting them to dialogue with you. It's always best to have your attention getter memorized in that sense. So that you're not looking down at the audience when you speak, but you're actually looking at them when you start out with your attention getter. We'll get to types of attention getters later. So it may be a question, it may be a statement, it may be a short story. The reason to listen is in response to the audience's question. The audience is asking, why should I listen to this presentation? How does it relate to me? How is it relevant to my beliefs, attitudes, values, and needs? And so you're building relevance here. And relevance is something that you start out here in the reason to listen, and you need to show the audience throughout the presentation how this presentation relates to their beliefs, attitudes, values, and needs, to keep their attention and to keep their engagement. The third one is the thesis statement. Again, we've talked about this. The speaker credibility is where you link yourself to the topic by specifying your experience, interest in, and research of the topic. So the audience is asking the question, why should I listen to you address us on this topic? What is your expertise? Now, for the Who Am I Really presentation, it's a little bit more difficult. You might say, well, I've had some experiences in life that have shaped me into the person that I am today, and I'm the only one who can talk about those experiences. And I've taken some time to reflect about those experiences. The preview of the main points is in response to the audience's question, what ground will you cover in this presentation? So the preview functions somewhat as a transition between the introduction, from the introduction to the body of your presentation. It communicates the scope of your presentation. Now we get to the body, and the body is the bulk of your presentation. The body consists of main points, and those main points I'm suggesting should be about between 2 and 4 main points. So you have to have at least 2, because if you divide anything up, you have to have more than one part. Anything more than 4 main points is too long, and in a 5 to 7 minute presentation, you won't do it justice. So the main points should be stated in full declarative sentences. It should be concise. It should be parallel in structure. It should support the thesis statement. You need to make sure there's a strong connection between the thesis statement and the main point. Look at it again and again to make sure that your main points flow out of your thesis statement. Your main points need to be coordinate in weight, meaning that a main point should be a main point. You should make a subordinate point a main point. So as you look at your main points, ask yourself, are they equal in weight? And then it should also reflect your organizational structure. So for the Who Am I Really presentation, you need to make sure that your main points reflect your metaphor, right? And then as we listen to your main points, we need to see some logical development from the first to the second to the third to the fourth. So, and then lastly, the main points should lead into the subordinate points, just as the thesis leads into the main points. So the main points singular, each one should lead into the subordinate points. Notice how I'm enumerating the main points and the subordinate points. The system I'm using, it's 1, 1.1, 1.2. I found this is the best way, especially if you're using this to speak from, because there's only 1.1 in your outline. Whereas if you're using a Roman numeral and a big A and a small a and a number 1, you could have a number of big A's, a number of number 1s, a number of number 2s. So this is the best format. I'm asking you to use it. So the subordinate point should support the main point under which it is located. Now, it may reflect a different organizational pattern. Don't worry about that as of yet. Again, a reminder, when you divide anything, a main point or subordinate point, it should result in at least 2 parts. Notice the indentation to the right. When you have an indentation to the right, it means that this is of subordinate value compared to what is on the left-hand side. All right, so I have 1.1, and if I'm going to divide that up, I'll divide that up into 1.1.1, 1.1.2. Between each main point, between main point 1 and main point 2, you'll see the transitional statement. The purpose of the transitional statement is to connect your main points, linking them, showing the connection and the relationship between your main points. And that's what you need to do in this transitional statement, is show how the first main point is related to the second main point. It also signals to the audience how you're moving, that you're moving on, that you're done with the first main point, and that there is progress, motion in your presentation. So the transition serves 2 functions. One, it reviews the previous main point or points, depending on which transition this is, and it previews the following main point singular. You can see that. And notice again, between the second and third main point, there is a transitional statement here between the second and third main point. All right, now we get to the conclusion. And in the conclusion, It has basically 4 functions. The first one is to signal to the audience that you are concluding your presentation. I know it sounds mechanical, but finally, in conclusion, to sum it all up is a good way of letting the audience know that you're finally going to land this speech. You're coming to the end of the presentation. The second one is a review or a restatement of the thesis and the main point. Let me see if I can fix this. Here, you don't add or repeat, or you don't add any new supporting material. All you're doing is restating what your thesis is and what your main points are. Third is the audience respond. This is where you ask the audience to respond. What you decided in the specific purpose in terms of audience response is where you actually reach out to the audience and ask them to respond to you. Okay, it's what you've been working at throughout your presentation. And then finally, you want to end memorably, end in a way that makes a final positive impression. It needs to be powerful, it needs to be vivid, it needs to be something like your attention getter, it needs to provide closure. All right, that brings me back to, that's in essence the template that I'm asking you to use for the semester. Thanks for taking the time to view this video. Have an awesome day.